येन चराचरं तत्पदं दर्शितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनं शलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णु गुरुर्देवो महेश्वर गुरुर्साक्षात् परब्रह्म तस्मै श्रीगुरुवे नमः। Respected Sri Vishwanath Kara, Dr. Chandrakant, other dignitaries on the stage, and dear friends of whom I have met a few. I have been asked to talk on a subject which is after my heart, but a little difficult in the sense that after so many years of having become familiar with the teachings of Swami Vivekananda, I still haven't been able to completely understand him. Because the vastness of his thought and his teachings, which you can find fortunately in the complete works of Swami Vivekananda, which have been compiled, don't seem to have been meant only for the century in which he lived or the century in which we live now, but seems to be projected into the future for many more centuries to come. Because the canvas on which Swami Vivekananda paints his thoughts is vast. It's not possible to fix any little criteria for it. I find it sometimes, especially when he goes into the depths or the heights of Vedantic thought, one sometimes stops and wonders, if you allow yourself to move with this, you may not come back to the body. I mean, it's tremendous. I don't know, you must have read Swami Vivekananda, but you see, most people have seen his picture at least everywhere. And selected few sayings of Swami Vivekananda are seen in most places in India, I'm sure, and also abroad. So about that I don't have to say much. But I think to understand the relevance of Swami Vivekananda for modern times, which is the subject of the talk today, one has to understand to some extent, to a limited capacities, what Swami Vivekananda was. That's important, because when you know a person, you know what he means and what is the relevance of his teachings. You must remember that Swami Vivekananda came upon the scene when religion was almost among the educated Bengal, what is called, what he used to call educated Bengal, the Babus, among whom the very value of Indian culture had been reduced to a very minimum level. I wouldn't say zero, but it had come to such a level that people thought that only Western ideas were good. Even the system of Hinduism was tailored to suit the Semitic thought, and the Brahmo Samaj was born. Raja Ram Mohan Roy was there, of course. But there's one great thing about Raja Ram Mohan Roy, I don't know if you know it. He was the first person to translate into English the principal Upanishads. But given that, the whole trend was that the usual practice of religion in this country is something for the ignorant, for the villagers, for the illiterate, all this image worship, this, that. That was the time when Swami Vivekananda came onto the scene. But before we come to Swami Vivekananda's story, as they say, search for the Rishi Mula, search for the root of the Rishi. What was the root? An almost illiterate temple priest who worshipped in a Kali temple. You must understand that Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, who was Swami Vivekananda's guru, was not a college-going, educated Babu. He was a simple, rustic soul living in Dakshineshwar and worshipping Kali, the mother, in a temple. Gadadhar Chattopadhyaya, Sri Ramakrishna was the name which people gave him out of respect. Now, this great man was not one who talked theories. Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa was a person who lived. Whatever he said, he had gone through, lived and experienced. In fact, it is difficult to find a single soul or a single person who has gone through all the different paths prescribed by religions and come to the conclusion personally through experience that they all lead to the same goal. Contemporary times, at least, you cannot find anybody like that. Most people go through one approach, all their lives they move along that, and they have understood it, and then they are gone, and the philosophy is about that. But here was a man who tried everything in the Hindu system of thought and practice, spiritual practice. He went through the worship of the mother, he went through the worship of Tantra, he did Bhairavi Brahmani taught him the Vaishnava Tantras. He worshipped Krishna. He worshipped, and then being close to Keshav Chandra Sen, he understood all about Christianity and spent some time as a practicing Christian. And then he spent some time as a practicing Sufi. And at the end he said, I have seen it. All top roads lead to the same goal. Here in contemporary times was a man who reflected the ancient saying of the Vedas, Egam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vedanti, that the truth is one, but the wise men may call it by different names. Why? To suit various factors, because it cannot be the same for everybody. Sri Ramakrishna in his very rustic, simple language used to say that the different paths to spiritual understanding are like the kind mother who prepares different sweets and different things to eat for different children depending upon what they like. Now, it was this great man who experienced the spiritual and not merely read or who talked about theories. For him, God was real. Spiritual experience was real. And this was a time when people thought that spiritual experience was an illusion and the world was real. There was a great Sufi who once said, you think that the world is real and spiritual experience is subjective. He said, I think that the spiritual experience is objective and the world is subjective. Now, for a long time, if I have said this, during the years of Newtonian physics, I would have been hooted out. But today, as science advances, it goes from certainty to uncertainty. I'm talking about pure science, not technology. Today, the most important scientific theory in quantum physics, which deals with the basic particles of matter, is the theory of uncertainty, where one cannot really decide if the basic particle of matter, if it is a particle or a wave. When you think it is a particle, it suddenly changes itself and begins to act like a wave. When you think it's a wave, it's acting like a particle. Some people even have gone to the extent of saying it depends on the observer, which is still a controversial subject. So, here was this Guru, this great man, and to him comes this young man, Swami Vivekananda, part of educated Bengal. You may not know this, but being part of educated Bengal, like all men of his time, he used to smoke, because then it was considered a big fashion to do, all men smoke. And then he used to eat pan and go to all the concerts. He used to play the tabla very well and sing very well. And he was exposed to every aspect of modern Bengal. Yet, deep down in his heart there was the what shall we call it, a pulsating energy of the ancient Indian culture, philosophy and religion. From his youth, he had this experience of seeing things which is beyond the ordinary mind. It is said that when he was a small boy, he said, before I went to sleep, I used to see a light. And he was such a skeptical man that many a time he thought that it was because the window was left slightly open. There was a man who was skeptical, who did not accept any belief, who had to accept something only if he experienced it. This is Swami Vivekananda. As a young man, Narendra Datta, he goes to Sri Ramakrishna. He is part of the Brahma Samaj. He sings. He goes to the Brahma Samaj. But nobody can give him a proper answer to, is there something beyond this world, or is this all there is? He has gone to various philosophers. He had met Devendranath Tagore. He had met many scientists. Finally, he goes as a young man to this village priest who is in the temple of Kali, Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. And he meets him and asks him, people say that you have seen God. Is that true? Have you seen him? Give me an honest answer. Because if it is scientific and if it is real, there is nothing better that one need to seek. Please tell me. And Ramakrishna smiles and says, better than I am seeing you. When he asked, have you seen God? He says, yes, much better than I see you before me. And Swami Vivekananda looks at him and says, here is a man. Whether he is under an illusion or whether he is not, I don't know. But he is definitely a sincere man who speaks from his heart. So he continues to go there, inquiring, experimenting. And one day, when nobody is around, he reaches Sri Ramakrishna's room, which is still there near the Dakshineshwar temple. If you go, before you enter the temple on the right side, there is a room where he used to sleep and live, very small room. He goes to him and Ramakrishna suddenly asks him, why have you taken so long to come to me? Where have you been? I have been looking for you all these years. And he weeps. And the thoughts that Swami Vivekananda himself has written is that he said, where have I landed with this madman? Why have I come to this mad guy? He's crying, I don't know who he is. He says, where were you? I was waiting for you. And then he goes away saying, maybe I should not go back there. Here is a madman. What will I do with him? But he goes again. And then their friendship, you can call it discipleship. I'm saying friendship because since ancient times, the Upanishadic period on in the Vedas, the disciple and the guru are not considered to be two separate sections. You know the famous mantra that we chant, Sahana Bhavatu, Sahano Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karavavahai. The key word is Saha. Sahana Bhavatu. May both of us be protected. Sahano Bhunaktu. May both of us be nourished. Sahaviryam Karavavahai. Let the energies of both of us increase. So that living with Ramakrishna, he began to understand that, what would you call that? There is a term, bio-existence, symbiotic existence, let us say, in the spiritual field, not physically. And living with him for years and learning from him practical ways of touching the inner reality, he finally discovered something which was tremendous in the sense that he had a taste of it when Sri Ramakrishna touched him once and passed on a certain, something which we cannot define, but the nearest thing is something like an electric current that went into him. and he saw light everywhere. And in fact, he started shouting, "What are you doing to me? Are you hypnotizing me? Where am I going?" And then he came back. That taste of what he had experienced remained with him and grew. Then at one time, he sat for 3 days together in a deep spiritual state. And then when he came back and went to meet his Guru Ramakrishna Paramahamsa and said that, "I want to be like this always." He said, "How can you be such a selfish fellow? I thought you would work for others, do good to others, do something for others. How can you say that I want to sit forever in this samadhi?" He said, "You have lots of work to do. Till that work is done, I am locking this and keeping the key with me. I will give it back to you when you have done your work. And all the work that you see today, the hundreds of Ramakrishna mission centers around the world, besides that, the work that is being done was done by this one individual, Swami Vivekananda, inspired by the blessings and active participation of his great master, what 100 people could not have done in 100 years. Where did this strength come from, this tremendous strength? And you also must remember that he passed away at a very young age of 43. Came like a lightning streak, did his work and pushed away. Didn't hang around when his work was over. Now, this experimental attitude of trying to find out and actually experience and not depend on somebody else's theory remained with Swamiji forever, even afterwards. And he said many times, you know how he went to the Parliament of Religions. He said many times that the way for India, he was waking India up from mere rituals and basic. He said, don't make your religion a religion of the temples and a religion of I don't eat this or I don't eat that, I don't touch this, I don't touch that. He said the essence of all religion, of Vedanta, essence of Vedanta. When he was asked to define what is the essence of the Bhagavad Gita, he said the essence of Vedanta is that every soul is potentially divine. Every soul is potentially divine. To manifest that divinity, which means to bring out that divinity, to express that divinity, either through work or through worship, or through the combination of all these things together, is the essence of religion, the essence of the Gita. All other things, he said, are subsidiary. Because he went right to the root of the problem. He said, wake up, you are not inferior to anybody in this earth. You are children of the divine. The divinity shines in you. The potential is infinite. Why are you limiting yourself to making these little circles in your backyard and going round and round it? He opened up people to the thought of science, and that science is complementary to religion, not against it. Because he said in his writings on Raja Yoga, which is a very important text, which of course some of the exercises should not be, if I may say so, practiced without a proper teacher. He said that this is an experimental science like any other science that you have got. Follow this properly under instructions and you will reach the goal. This is not wild superstition. These are his words, or imaginations of some illusion souls. He said this is a practical experience that you can all have. He built up in this country where we were already under the yoke of a foreign, not one foreign, we have been ruled by so many influences that came from outside this country. Finally, the British. He actually helped people, sowed the seeds of freedom. I would say what Mahatma Gandhi achieved in 1947 the seeds of that freedom, self-respect, and the understanding of the divinity within were sowed by Swami Vivekananda. 150, 100 and now it is his 150th, I think, centenary is going to be next year or something, 30. Now here is this man. And all young people who came under his care took upon themselves the motto that service to mankind is service to God. He said, serve Daridra Narayan. He said, Narayan in the form of Daridra, which is the unfortunate poor people. Serve them. He said, there is no other way to purify your souls and reach the Supreme. Because somewhere along the line, people were laboring under the illusion that to be spiritual and religious is to be lazy. You do nothing, you simply sit and meditate. Swamiji said, no one can do that. He said, if you think you are becoming sattvic, you are actually becoming tamasic. You are eating, drinking and sleeping and thinking that Sushupti is equivalent to Samadhi, which is not so. He said, the only way to wake up the man, the human being, which is why it's called man-making religion, he said, is to make a person shift from the inertia, which is a tamasic guna, first into rajas, provided the activity is not self-centered, but for others. Through doing this, one purifies the mind and the heart till one is able to touch what is actually called sattva, which is tranquility, peace and understanding. This was a very important distinction that Swamiji made. And he told the monks of the Ramakrishna order, you are not coming here to simply sit down and do bhajans or meditate. You have come here to work for God in human form. He said, all other gods that we know of were taught to us in pictures, in stories, in Puranas. But these gods are the gods in front of you. If you serve them, then you are on your spiritual path. Plus, experiment is the key to understanding divinity. This was another one of his important statements. So, is that not relevant to the present system? It was relevant many years ago, but if you go through, I can only suggest that you read the complete works of Swami Vivekananda. And as you read, you will see that the relevance of Swami Vivekananda to modern times keeps on increasing rather than reducing. Usually what happens, somebody does something and goes. After 100 years, the relevance is lost. Today, the relevance of Swami Vivekananda is as fresh, and perhaps in the future, it may become more. This is my understanding. You see what is happening here. I think for some reason that this is also a manifestation of Swamiji's thoughts. And whenever I see something happening, I see that this is something which has been the seed sown by this great soul. And don't think that the monks of the Ramakrishna order, I am not a monk of the Ramakrishna order, but the monks of the Ramakrishna order are people who have no other works, or they have come here to wear saffron and settle down happily. No. Some of them are doctors, brilliant doctors, engineers, scientists who have decided that they dedicated their life to the work, to help other human beings. I know I have been part of the Ramakrishna mission, not only in India. People come from all over the world. I know a person from a Swami who originally comes from Iraq. He did his post-graduation in London. And then he read Swami Vivekananda. And he decided, instead of going for a job, let me go to the Ramakrishna Sevashram in Banaras and serve the poor. How do you like that? I think the young people especially have a lot to learn from this, because it's not possible to define Swami Vivekananda or talk about his relevance to modern man in 10 minutes, half an hour, 1 hour. We can speak for hours together on it. So my suggestion is that please read the complete works of Swami Vivekananda. That is the best investment you can make. And the Ramakrishna Mission sells it at a very, very moderate cost. Having said this, there is one book which has been brought out by the Ramakrishna Mission, which usually people don't read. It's there in the complete works, but you skip it. Here you see the heart of Swami Vivekananda. They are called the letters of Swami Vivekananda. And they are so honest and down to earth that anyone who reads it, I am sure something will happen to them in some way to arouse their minds to spiritual and social action. I've got this copy with me. I think it's a good thing to have it in the library and give it to all your students. Letters of Swami Vivekananda. They date from the time he left, before he left for Chicago for the Parliament of Religions, and continue till he came back and just before he passed away, writing to Sister Nivedita and his disciple and so on. They are such beautiful. First of all, the language is excellent. Apart from the language, the content, it's so important. So before I wind up, I'm going to read one or two letters of Swami Vivekananda. There's one letter, before I read this, where in his wandering days before he went abroad and became famous, he's somewhere in the Himalayan foothills. And one of his close disciples, Swami Akhandananda, who was known as Gangadhar before he became Akhandananda, writes to him saying that, "Oh Swamiji, oh Dada, you must be now in the hills and meditating most of the time. How wonderful it is." And he writes back such a direct letter. He said, "Yes, I love the Himalayas, I'm having a wonderful time, but I can't say I'm really meditating for most of the time, because half my time is spent in wondering where the next chapati comes from." Having seen this as a reality, he said to the missionaries, don't go to the villages and give people Vedanta and all these religions. They are saturated with it. They are fed up. Teach them how to eat, make rotis, how to earn their bread first. Let their stomachs be satisfied, then you can lead them into Vedanta. Now, this letter, I will drop some of the parts because they are not so relevant. He is writing from Chicago on 28th May 1894 to Alasinga Perumal in Madras, who was one of the young men who collected money from door to door to send Swamiji abroad. He writes to Alasinga, he says, "Dear Alasinga, I could not reply to your note, etc., etc., because I was whirling to and fro from New York to Boston," and so on. Then, leaving all that, his personal things, he says things are very expensive here and so on. He says, "I have had enough appreciation in my own country. Appreciation or no appreciation, sleep not, slacken not. You must remember that not a bit even of our plans has been carried out. Act on the educated young men. Bring them together and organize them. Great things can be done only by great sacrifices. No selfishness, no name, no fame, yours or mine, nor even my master's name. Work. Work the idea, the plan. My boys, my brave, noble, good souls, to the wheel, to the wheel. Put your shoulders. Stop not to look back for name or fame or any such nonsense. Throw self overboard and work. Remember, the grass when made into a rope by being joined together can even chain and hold a mad elephant. The Lord's blessings on you all, His power be in all of you, as I believe it already is. Wake up and stop not till the goal is reached, say the Vedas." Now this quotation is from the Mundaka Upanishad. Uttishta jagrata, prapya varanyabodhat. Arise, awake, stand up. Don't stop till you reach the goal. the long night is passing, the day is approaching. The wave has risen, nothing will be able to resist its tidal fury. The spirit, my boys, the spirit. The love, my children, the love. The faith, the belief, and fear not. Fear is the greatest sin. My blessings on all, and so on and so forth. Now, there are some Vedantic things which I don't want to read. One more letter I'm looking for. There are beautiful descriptions of China, Japan, Hong Kong of those days, where he said they're all poor, but they're working so hard that I bet at one time they will be successful nations. This was said 140 years ago, believe me. Here is another one. He is writing from Chicago. I read this the last. Dear Kiddy, writing to a friend of his. I agree with you so far that faith is a wonderful insight and that it alone can save. But there is a danger in it of breeding fanaticism, barring further progress. Jnana is all right, but there is a danger of it becoming dry intellectualism. Love is great and noble, but it may die away in meaningless sentimentalism. A harmony of all these is the thing required. Ramakrishna was such a harmony. Such beings are few and far between, but keeping him and his teachings as the ideal, we can move on. And if amongst us, each one may not individually attain to that perfection, still we may get it collectively by counteracting, equipoising, adjusting and fulfilling one another. This would be the harmony by a number of persons and a decided advance on all other forms and creeds. For a religion to be effective, enthusiasm is necessary. At the same time, we must try to avoid the danger of multiplying the creeds. Don't make it into a sect. I am not important. The work is important. We preach neither social equality nor inequality, but that every being has the same rights and insist upon freedom of thought and action in every way. We reject none, neither the theist, nor the pantheist, nor the Advaitin, nor the polytheist, nor the agnostic, nor even the atheist. The only condition of being a disciple is modeling a character at once the broadest and the most intense. The soul has neither sex nor caste nor imperfection. These are some of the messages of Swami Vivekananda. And now it's for you to find out how relevant they are, even to the present situation, and maybe 100 years hence.